This is Build Where You Are, an educational podcast series that is for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Build Where You Are brings you the raw and uncut journeys of entrepreneurs across a range of industries. From food and beverage to apparel and business services, tune in to Season 1 to hear how 10 entrepreneurs built their businesses from the ground up. Welcome to Build Where You Are. This is a podcast that is put on by ESO Ventures. I'm your host, Akintunde Ahmad, and I'm super excited to be here with our first guest. If you don't know already, this is Marisa Gittens of Cook and Run, and I'm just happy to be here with you today. How are you, Marisa?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I don't want to beat around the bush or belabor the point. I want to get right to it. And so I'm curious, a lot of folks in the Bay Area specifically are interested in this space of, cooking, food trucks, catering, candy companies, all of these things. And I know you have experience in the overall field of food and beverage, and also with your catering company now. So I'm curious just to hear more about the origins of Cook and Run, how that came to be, and what really drove you, into this industry.
Okay, well, it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to cut through all the non-necessary parts. But basically, out of college, I used to run a after-school and summer program for at-risk youth kids in San Francisco.
Okay.
We started doing a lot of fundraisers that involved food and made a lot of money. We took, our first year, we took 10 kids to Disneyland on the program. And then the last year, we took about 40 kids and 10 adults on the program.
Yeah.
So anyways, a lot of those fundraisers revolved around food. And as 2008 approached, as the mortgage crisis approached, there was a lot of bureaucracies around my position and working with the kids.
Yeah.
And because of that, and because I was young and I was 25, I was just like, all right, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just going to be a chef because it's that easy. And I'm just going to start a candy company and call it Dainty Delicacies, and I'm going to be rich, and it's going to be easy, and I'm going to make it because I was already doing a lot of chocolate covered strawberries and desserts with the kids.
Got you.
But I quickly found out that the reason why I was making so much money with the kids was because people were buying stuff for the kids. It was a lot of pity buys. It wasn't actually them wanting to purchase the product itself. So without removing the kids made it, kind of a failure essentially, because you kind of have to bring perfect products and stuff like that. So anyways, because of that experience, I still wanted to run a business and I still wanted to be in the industry.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to do it. I had some major failures on some caterings that I had done during that year. And so because of that, I was like, all right, I'm just going to take a job as a chef. This is going to be a quick job and learn how to do some of the stuff. And then once I learn how to do it, I'll go back to my business, basically. I took a major pay cut. I was at like 25. This was like 2010, you know what I mean? So that was great. And then I decided to take a job for like $13 an hour or something like that, like major pay cut.
Yeah.
Just to learn what was going on, to see, how I could get better and do better in the business and the industry in general. Fast forward like 7 years later, I was able to kind of make my way through the entire industry almost. Like I started as a line cook, and then I moved up to like a commissary sous, which is just a person who's like looking over like a shift or whatever.
Okay.
And then I was able to be an actual commissary sous at Starbucks for their La Boulange. When they originally partnered with La Boulange with their pastries and stuff, they took over all of their cafes, and Starbucks was taking over all of their food production as well. Yeah. So we started taking over production for 10,000 persons a week or more. And
just here in the Bay Area specifically?
This was in South San Francisco.
Okay.
And then I worked under a master chef of France for 3 years. And that's where I learned a lot of technique, I learned some technique from him, but ultimately most of the technique I learned was from my husband that I met in the kitchen, and we work together now. But I just put it out there just in case he sees this because he's my mentor, not him.
Noted.
Anyways,
Noted.
just saying. So, anyways, I worked for him for a while. After that, I was kind of fast forward to an executive soup position at Bon Appetit, which was just a large catering company that works for corporate companies like Uber and Twitter. In fact, I opened Uber's kitchen in their downtown office, as well as LinkedIn's kitchen. So I was part of that startup group.
Gotcha.
And anyways, so after all of that, my dad died in 2016, and it's okay. But ultimately, it kind of gave me a realization of like, what the F are you doing? Like, are you just going to be working for these people for the rest of your life, or are you going to, go back to what you were doing, or are you going to have any kind of life? Because at the time, I was working like 12 hours a day. So it was just a lot. So I quit my job, and then I started the catering company that I'm currently in now. It didn't start off as Cook and Run. It just started off as Marissa's private chef business. I just didn't want to go back to work traditionally. And so with all that, I just started kind of like hustling, just doing private chef events.
Yeah.
And over the course of 4 years, it started becoming something. And then COVID hit. I was like, what am I going to do? I don't know. I thought I was going to have to shut my doors completely. And it was just me at the time. So I was like, whatever. But I had found a ad on Oakland website, the city of Oakland website, talking about doing emergency meals for COVID, for people that have been affected from COVID.
Got it.
Like homeless or underserved individuals or kids or schools and all that kind of stuff. So at first I didn't really know what it was, but I was like, I could do meals, lunches, whatever.
Yeah.
It turned out to be World Central Kitchens, which is I want to say he's like a global nonprofit organization that essentially goes to cities in crisis and finds ways to work with the people that the infrastructure that's already there, i.e. restaurants, to then feed the population. So so he opened it up to caterers. They were opening up to everyone because at the time COVID was like, it was crazy. It was right in the beginning.
Yeah.
We ended up securing the contract in July of 2020. And through that contract and a few others, we were able to feed over 100,000, 150,000 persons during COVID 2020 and 2021 pandemic years.
That's a lot. And so that got you through 2020 and 2021. And then as things, kind of started to open up, people were meeting in person, people were doing the backyard parties and the events, businesses are going back into offices in some cases. Then what? Did you transition back into just private events catering? Or?
So essentially what happened in COVID, 2020 and 2021, it catapulted our business, right?
Okay.
I went from 1 person to 6. I was able to hire my husband. I was able to put my entire household on the business, kind of like I live off of the business. Without it, we're done, We were able to expand as a company in general to different avenues of revenue. So with those 2 years, it changed how I viewed how we were going to make money in general. So one of those avenues is through government contracts. Currently, we have a contract with Oakland Summer Lunch Program, which is for the free and reduced lunch program. Last year, we did 16,000. I think we're on track to do about 25 this year. We've also secured an AmeriCorps contract with the federal government. And that is feeding the AmeriCorps kids that go to the naval base in Sacramento. And then our other avenue of revenue is catering, obviously, and that encompasses all catering. We do private chef, corporate catering, weddings, and large scale corporate caterings. Like like if you had like 500 people or something, we could come and do that. So that's that revenue, which we are currently trying to still work out a little bit, I think. Catering is very up and down. It's not consistent. So my newest venture that I'm getting into right now is I'm gonna open up a ghost kitchen next month.
This breaking news?
I guess, sure. Have this come out in August, so the people that own the kitchen I'm at don't know early.
There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Anyways, but yeah, we are gonna open up a ghost kitchen. I initially got the idea because the kitchen that we're in kind of played us with some corporate stuff, so we can't really expand there. So it was like, all right, my executive chef is very temperamental. All chefs are very temperamental, so just FYI. But he's been wanting to move for a long time. So I've been looking and looking and looking, and then finally we found this kitchen that had equipment in it, and it was like the rent was basically half what the going rate was for everyone else. So I was like, it's double what I'm paying now in rent, but it's the only move we can make that's gonna, it's either I'm gonna stay where I'm at right now, or we're gonna make moves to
Expand.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's what that is.
So, first off, that's an amazing journey. And I appreciate you just being so open, honest, and just candid about the experiences that you've had on the road to getting where you are now. One of the things I wanted to backtrack to was there are actually three things. One was about taking that leap of faith. Two was about taking that pay cut in order to gain experience that you needed to further your career. And then lastly was just about pivoting the business, whether it be COVID, whether it be what you're saying now. And so for the first part, in taking that leap of faith, a lot of entrepreneurs, you have that moment, right? There where usually folks are working a full-time job or working part-time, start getting into their side hustle. And then they're like, okay, this is something that maybe I can actually do full-time, or maybe I want to cut part of my full-time job work hours to dedicate more time to this. And you have to say, wait a minute, this is going to be the first time in my life where I don't have a consistent check coming in, or I don't know every 2 weeks I'm getting this, and it's on me to make that happen. So I'm curious, what advice would you give to folks as they're nearing that point and making that decision of okay, hold on, I'm about to bet on myself and actually jump off the porch and get into this?
My advice is to figure out how much your life costs. A lot of times people think that their life costs more than it actually does, but it doesn't usually. When I decided to make the leap of faith, for sure, I was like, I'm not gonna go back to work. I decided to figure out how much it costs to be me. How much did it cost to pay my rent? How much did it cost to put my I've been with my husband 12 years, so I've always had someone to help me with bills, but it was like, how much did it cost? But he's never paid for me. I had to pay myself, So how much is it then when I like to go out? How much does it cost to do all of these things?
Right. So you had to make an expense sheet, you had to budget and say, okay, cool. Each month I need to bring in this amount in order to support the lifestyle that I live.
Yeah, I had a number that I had to hit every month. I think that once you see the number was a lot lower than I thought it was going to be, right? Because when you're in your a job, you're I don't even mean to say it like that. It's okay to have a job, but you're kind of in a consistent situation, right? Where you can't see outside of that bubble, so you can't see that you actually can afford your bills, but you can't because you're over here, drinking with your friends every other weekend or whatever it is that you're doing, even though you don't see that day cost you maybe $200-300, and that if you didn't spend that $200-300, whatever, it would be put somewhere else. So then people start thinking that their lives cost actually more than what they actually are, right? So I feel like if you really want to make the leap, it is about figuring out how much does it cost to be you, and then how many things do you need to sell, or how many events do you need to have to make that number?
Right.
And so for me, when I did it, the initial number was $2,500. I needed about $2,500 to pay all my bills, and have food and have a little bit of spending money, because I didn't want to add a bunch of hanging out and shit, because that's not the point, right? So it was about $2,500, and I thought, and then when I did the math on doing what I was charging at the time, which was low, how much it would take for me to do that in events, it turned out to be I only needed to work 10 days out of the month.
I see.
And
And everything
so-
above that was excess.
Was excess, right?
Right.
And so, and the truth of the matter was, when I really thought about it, I was like, bitch, you're working 31 days, 30 days out of the month for less than, or for this, right? And you're
Right.
still scraping, right?
Yeah.
But you could work 10 days out of the month, still scrape, but you get 20 days off.
Right.
So I was like, that's it. That's the deal. That's the deal. This is why ever work again? You know what I mean? So after that, it was really about just trying to make those 10 days happen. At first, it wasn't like nothing was happening. You know what I mean? Like it was slow for a couple of months, but over time, things, you get your 1, and your 2, and then your 3, and then eventually things would like happen to where I was like, okay, I could just pay my bills off Craigslist, right? Because originally it was just me answering ads on Craigslist. And then it was like, oh, I'm making money off Craigslist. Then it was like, oh, I don't even need to look at Craigslist no more. You know what I mean? And then it was like, now I have my own clientele or my own this or my own that or different revenues of how I'm doing things.
Or word of mouth from people you had successful events.
I mean, I guess. I know that there is this whole like advertising machine, right? That like people do this like word of mouth or whatever, but I'm a hustler. Like that's what I am. That's the core of me, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for the next best thing or looking for the next get or looking for the next thing. And that's what worked for me. Other people do this whole like email list and get all these repeat clients and do all this other shit. And that works for them too. And I'm not saying that that's not, trust me, I'm trying to get to understand that also.
Yeah.
But I didn't get there doing it, right? I got here off hustle. You know what I mean? And I understand that hustle only takes you so far, but I do believe that like that grit, that you making it happen no matter what, and understanding that it has to happen no matter what, is really what gets you to the next step.
And I wanted to, before I like move to the second point that I was hitting on, one of the things that you said was like, when you started off, it was slower than what you expected. And you kind of had to, people call it different things. You could say, trust the process, stay the course. But can you talk a bit about that as well? So it's like, okay, cool. You're making a big decision. You're saying, look, I'm investing in myself. I have took a very practical approach. This is what it costs to live this lifestyle. This is what my product costs per event. This is how many I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said,
oh, you know what? Also, I left something out.
Oh, let's see.
People really need to utilize government programs.
I was going to ask about that.
So yeah. I feel like that a lot of people like to be like, oh, I'm not going to take food stamps. Oh, I'm not going to do that. I will take every dollar the government gives me, just like them white people did in 1920, and all these white people got generational wealth. Okay, so I am going to take every dime from the government, and not like because I don't earn it. When you're a business owner, sometimes you're making $0. Right. You know what I mean? Or you're not making any money. Yeah. So why can't you get some, like, why can't you go to the government, get the food stamps that that you qualify for,
and that you pay taxes for your whole life,
and that you pay taxes for, and use it just the same way as I think about unemployment, right? People work their whole life and never take that unemployment. What you don't trip off is that they're taking that money off your check every month. So if you never pull that money literally goes to somebody who never worked for it ever in their life. It's just lying in another white man's pocket on some real. Yeah. So for me, it's kind of like, why work that whole time? I'm about to cash out immediately once I know that I have a certain amount of money. Like, you need to cash that out and then just like take a break off of work, however you want to look at it. You know what I mean? But I just feel like people don't look at government programs well. Yeah. And while especially I would say my friends definitely call me like the government queen, right? Because I know every program. Yeah. And because I come from nonprofits, I originally was in a nonprofit doing this with kids, then I know that there's a lot of nonprofits out there. Yeah. And a lot of times it's just about having the right paperwork and qualifying for whatever that, if you qualify, then you get the money. You know what I mean? It isn't about like someone else. It's not that someone else doesn't get it because you got it. No, everyone that qualifies gets the money. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's why the government tries to do all this cut and screws with the qualifications, because that's what it is. If you qualify, you get the money. That's it. And
then Now that we're on, I'm gonna table the other points I was gonna make because we're on this topic of working with the government, and you're saying, look, you pay taxes your
Oh
whole
yeah, no,
life.
and I work
You,
for the
right,
government.
right. But I was gonna say, it's two
Yeah.
sides to this, right? On one end, it's like, look, this is a society that our ancestors built for unpaid labor. This is a society that blocked us from getting the benefits from the GI Bill after our ancestors fought in these same wars as other folks, and we didn't get the access to the housing loans, and we didn't get the access,
Or the
to
college loans,
any of
or
these
the
things,
voting
and
rights, or a lot
simultaneously
of
got
stuff.
redlined and all of
Yeah.
these things. So I fully understand that side of what you're saying. And I was just curious on the other side of it, you mentioned that you got a lot of government contracts for your work.
Who I am today because of government money.
Right. So
Period.
I'm curious to hear more about that because a lot of times I feel like folks are like, look, I know I have the logistics of my business down. Like in your
Mhm.
case, it's like, look, I know how to cook good food. I know how to get it delivered. I know how to set it up, all that. Now I just need to find the clientele. And sometimes folks aren't even thinking about and thinking about it in the way that you are. Some folks
Yeah.
are like email list, traditional door knocking, but you're like, look, I was looking on Craigslist, but then you said, wait a minute, it's a whole world of funds out there that's coming from these government contracts.
Well, I didn't say that. I got
Right.
a COVID contract and I
Right.
realized that there was government money.
Right.
And I also realized that government money is guaranteed and that there's a difference, right? Like with a private client, you're just, yeah, they'll pay you, theoretically, right? But the government is going to pay you whether they're happy or not. You're in a contract with them. They
Yeah.
have to pay you.
Yeah.
So it's a different story. And a lot of times they are a silent client, right? Like once you get your contracts, what they gonna do? You know what I mean? Like they have to work with you. You've already in a signed contract, so they have to, like, if you make a mistake, they have to work with you. It isn't the same as like, you didn't make this delivery, I'm not paying you. Like even with them, okay, so what? This is what happened. I give you a good reason. You still have to pay me. You know what I mean? So with the government, it is more of a guaranteed cash. Not only that though, I feel like I'm not able to do as a chef. I'm not really able to do like how you say, like social work, like
Yeah.
I can't really better my community essentially. And with COVID, that has also kind of snowballed us into wanting to work with schools and primarily jails. Kind of gave me back my purpose as far as like how I can get back to the community. Because ultimately we want to serve jails eventually, and we really believe that food is the most practical and most like targeted thing that we can pinpoint right now that can make a difference in the inmates' lives, in the CO's lives, and in the overall how would I say, I guess, feel of the jail, or like the atmosphere, right? It's like I feel like people like to come to these problems with all these like ethereal things, like, oh, have more jobs, and oh, do if they were educated better, and all this other stuff that we can't really do anything about right now. It's just they're too high structurally to actually make a real difference as an individual.
Right. You're saying, what can I do today, immediately, given the
What can I do that will
circumstance?
actually make a difference, that could actually make real changes for inmate populations? Because I mean, ultimately, whether they are criminals or not, I mean, that's still up to debate, right? Not all of them are. And not only that, but you're right, or the ethereal reasons are right, that a lot of them are in there because of racism and because of classism and the fact that they're poor, So, and with all those reasons combined, there should be more of an effort to, at the very least, make their stay in the jail or prison time more
humane,
tolerable. Yeah, more humane. I mean, ultimately, I understand that there is a people are making money off the prisons, and yes, if I fed the prisons, we would make money. I wouldn't be broke. No, but at the same time, I'm not going to squeeze every dime out of it so that my stockholders can get whatever money that they're getting, so that these people are eating food that I would serve to dogs or lower.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? The food grade that they're getting, I don't even know if they serve it to dogs. I think it's even lower, like horses and shit. You know what I mean? Like it's like they're not giving them any kind of grade food that we would even see, like not even at like the dollar store kind of like grade food. Like it's way worse than that, So I feel like people kind of don't see like how, like when you turn a blind eye to something, just like whenever you turn a blind eye to something, just like slavery, right? It gets worse and worse behind the scenes. You know, people just take more and more and more and more away from those who don't have a voice. And ultimately, they don't have a voice. You know what I mean? Um, so, and not only that, but it just makes the whole system broken, right? The CIs don't want to work there because the inmates are so irate and, you know, on the brink of insanity. You know what I mean? And I know that essentially giving someone a plate of food isn't going to change all of that, but it does change your mood. It changes everyone's mood. You know what I mean? It changes the way you think, the way you feel, how willing you are to listen or not listen, how willing you are to change or not change. You know, ultimately, a lot of these black men and women that are in jail for whatever reason have already dealt with tons and tons and tons of bullshit just because they're black. Not to mention whatever issue may have happened in their life based on the fact that their parents are black. So statistically, those people are already coming at a major disadvantage. And then on top of that, you want to make sure that they're in the worst possible conditions possible. And the only thing that I feel like I can tackle that would make a real difference is what they're eating.
Gotcha. I want to now circle back to the second point because I know we went in that one. We talked about, you know, the government contracts and utilizing government programs and everything in between. The first point that we were talking about is that leap of faith, jumping off the porch and getting into the business. And what I tabled before was actually taking that pay cut to gain experience in a field that you had interest in. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know if it has to do with like internet, social media, and access to information quickly, but I feel like we're in this age or era of seeing more want for instant gratification than we ever have. And a lot of times what I'm saying is that a lot of folks are not willing to put in the work or even, you know, take a pay cut for a period of time with the long-term goal of like, okay, cool, I'm taking this pay cut now because I want to gain this expertise so that I can launch myself and figure out how to do this myself. I don't know if you at the time had that forethought and that was what was on the top of your mind or what, but I'm just curious if you could talk a bit about that. Sometimes you're like, this is something I'm interested in, but are you willing to make that sacrifice to gain the knowledge that could be more useful?
I would agree with you as far as people are very much into instantly, you know, they want something to happen and then it's like, I put water in the plant, it should be grown. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. I would argue that that is not a new thing though. My dad was like that, right? My dad was a get rich quick guy. He was into every stupid business he could be into. It was like one time I remember he came home and he brought like 10 boxes full of paper, what is it? They're not paper plates, but placemats, right? Just all these placemats. And he's like, I'm gonna be so rich, Marissa. I'm gonna go and sell all these placemats to all the restaurants, and they're gonna put their menus on the placemats, and then I'm gonna sell them all. And I'm like thinking to him, I'm like, it's just fucking paper. They could just do their own. But anyways, he was all into it. Like he thought it was so smart, right? And he did a few of those, right? He did chia pets and did some other thing with a ball. Just dumb shit. Anyways, but he did a lot of them, right? And it was a lot of get rich quick schemes. And as a kid, I always kind of saw it that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work. So when I did approach my business itself, I kind of understood that anything that's quick isn't gonna work, right? Because I had already seen my dad go through it. So I knew that it was gonna have to be you're gonna have to know what you're doing. Ultimately, when I started the first business, the candy business, it kind of reminded me of what my dad used to do, trying to make something work that I didn't actually know how to do, you know? So ultimately, taking the job and taking the pay cut, I guess I had privilege at the time, you know? I had somebody that was taking care of me. So it was just I was like, oh, I could do whatever. I could do this. Again, I was 25 and I thought I could just do whatever, you know? But I would argue that the more you think about something, the more you contemplate on the bad and the good and the less likely you're ever going to really do it. That it really has to be a gut thing. It has to be something that you feel inside, and it's either you're going to go with that feeling or you're just going to not go with it. It's not, you're never going to really be able to rationalize yourself into it. I mean, a good example is this new kitchen I just like went into. The second I walked into that kitchen, I knew. I was like, you got to tell this bro, you got to give him the money, like you got to do this, you have to do it. As time goes, that's a lot of money, right? So as the seconds are going and I'm realizing what I've committed to and all this shit, I start getting scared, right? Because I'm like, fuck, now I gotta make this money. I gotta make sure that this kitchen works. I have to do, even though I believe in myself and I believe in my kitchen, I believe in my staff, I know that we can do this. I'm still like, oh my God, now I need to rationalize it. Now I'm like, okay, how are you gonna do this? Now I'm doing numbers all day. I'm doing all this other stuff, right? And then finally, I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm just gonna talk to Steven about this because if it goes bad, at least it's not just my decision, right? So I talked to him, and in the end, he's like, well, this is the move. Like, he kind of just said, like, essentially, the only way we're going to know is if we do it, and we have to make this move. Like, we have to make the leap. And you can't rationalize the leap. You have to either do it or not, right? You can only mitigate your risk, but you can't stop yourself from failing. You can only, but if you never take the risk, you'll never move forward. Nothing will ever happen. You'll just stay where you are.
Interesting. And I feel like that's just a part of business that all entrepreneurs face. Like, I know within this whole ecosystem of ESO Ventures, and when we're having these talks inside of, our community groups and whatnot, that's one of the things that people always like talk about and vent about. It's like, man, there's never, even when you're doing good, there's always like, okay, I'm doing good now, but I always have this pressure and this like feeling inside like you have to keep going because again, when you're an entrepreneur, there is no guaranteed ending. You have to keep going.
Well, when you're a Black entrepreneur, but okay.
also true. And we know who our audience is.
Yeah, because white people do a thing called friends and family round. Okay.
Also true.
Which not most people don't even know about. But
also true. So, but yeah, I think the point that I'm making is to your point is that's part of like business. That's part of entrepreneurship of like, cool, you run all the tests, like you said, you mitigate the risk, you do your cost benefit analysis, all of this, but at the end of the day, this is just exists on paper or your spreadsheet or your thoughts or however, you won't know until you actually do it. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be some sort of risk associated with it. And in order to find out what's on the other side of that, you have to take that leap of faith and make it happen.
Yes.
Gotcha.
You can't walk over or under, you must walk through.
No over, no under, must walk through. That's real. And so the other side of what I wanted to talk about for like my 3 points that I was just thinking about as you were telling this overall history of your business and where you are is this point about pivoting, right? Some of the greatest companies that folks have ever heard of, like if you heard the origin story behind how they started and what they were doing, you would be like, wait, that's what they started doing? I think I was hearing something the other day. I was like,
Listerine was a floor cleaner.
Right. I think Shopify, like the website about some people, like they used to sell surfboards or something.
Okay.
Yeah, just a range of like different
Amazon
things.
Was a bookstore.
Right. Airbnb, you used to only be able to rent out a mattress like in your living room, and they didn't have a map. So imagine trying to rent out a place and not being able to look at a map and see, like you don't even know where it is, like a listing. So all of these companies that folks look up to and see that they're billion-dollar companies and all these things never had it all figured out from the get-go. And so one of the things that you spoke very candidly about is just, look, I pivoted all the time. I was trying to figure out what made sense. Obviously, from 2020 to 2022 and beyond, that was like an unprecedented pandemic that nobody expected, and obviously nobody was prepared to tackle. So that was like a forced pivot as well. But can you just talk a bit about, specifically for your business, but just in general about that ability to be versatile and to have that mindset of like, okay, circumstances change and you have to be open-minded enough to know that like, look, sometimes you got to pivot and do what works with the times. Or I don't know for you if it's like, oh, my favorite dish is peach cobbler, but people in this area don't like this. And so I have to pivot. Like, can you just talk a little bit about that theory and that mindset?
I mean, I think that pivoting comes from the hustle, right? Because if you're just like trying to make sure that you are getting whatever, you're making sure that it happens no matter what, you're going to have to pivot sometimes because ultimately, you know, nothing always works, right? So you have to find a way to make that tweak, to make that move, to make that instead of taking it. I feel like a lot of times people take things personally when they have to pivot, right? Like, oh, that means my product isn't good, or oh, that means my what I'm doing isn't good. But in reality, it really has nothing to do with that. It's just either where you're able to access your customers or how like a good example is there's another guy in my commissary kitchen. He is horrible. Like his food is crap. But that dude has so many caterings, okay?
Yeah.
Like caterings on caterings on caterings. And I'm struggling to book them, right? He can't book government contracts like I can, but he's on caterings on caterings on caterings every single day, has a staff of like 8 or 9, more than me, right? But his food is whack. You know what I mean? So it's like, sorry, I kind of got off track there. But I'm just saying that I'm just saying that just because someone else is doing great in that space and you're not, doesn't mean that, oh, your product is horrible. It just means that you might need to pivot to a different way of looking at it or doing it in a different way. Ultimately, I go back to what I can do, right? If I can do it, then I will do it, right? So it isn't about the idea came to me because I'm so into wanting to do this idea, right? It came to me, a lot of times ideas come to me out of necessity. And because of that, then the solution becomes what you need, right? And so instead of, I guess, being very solution based and looking at things as, I'm not going to blame anyone for this problem. This problem is the problem. How do we get to that solution? Will usually get you to your pivot.
Yeah.
And that's I in my opinion, just because if you're not attached to the idea, you're just attached to the framework, right? Like I'm attached to Cook and Run, right? But if I'm doing a government contract cooking, that doesn't mean shit. Or if I'm doing a private dinner for 5, or if I'm cooking for a beautiful wedding, all those things don't matter just as long as I'm part of Cook and Run,
Understood.
So, and I do believe that Cook and Run over time will be something else, right? Yeah. Like, if I become this person that I want to be or become this mogul in a space that I want to be in, then Cook and Run won't be this private chef company anymore. It'll be something else. So,
Understood that portion too. One of the things that you just said about not taking it personal is also one of the things that I just want to talk about a little more before we transition to this last portion. I feel like a lot of times entrepreneurs start businesses out of something that they're passionate about, which is what you've been speaking to all day. And because of that, we have a tendency to take things more personally because we put in a lot of personal effort, time, have a commitment, attachment to these things. So like for myself and like venturing into fashion, right? It's like, okay, cool. I like clothes. I like sustainable development. I like building stuff with folks who look like me. But I have a specific style that I like. And so when I make stuff and I'm like, okay, I like this. I wear this. Whatever, think I dress good, whatever it is. And then you put things out and it's like, oh, this isn't selling. And then you make some other things that you may not feel as good about. And then people are buying those and you're like, do I not know how to dress? Like, or do I not know like, am I good at this? Because it's not what you expect. But then at the end of the day, you can't take it personal. You can't. You like, if this is what's selling better, then this is what I have to go with. Because at the end of the day, the point of this business, you're making money doing this. And if you got customers who are supporting it, then that's how you have to go about it.
I would say to that as an owner, I build the structure for you to be passionate about, but it's the employees that are passionate about what I give them. I have to be the one who sees the bigger picture. I have to be the one who is making the moves and seeing the move before you see it. And I can't do that if I'm sitting up here in passion land over here all in love with the shit. Like how many times when you're brand new in love with somebody that you're thinking about the next day? No, you're just thinking about what's happening right now, in the moment, the bullshit, right? I feel like it happens the same with with people that are very passionate about one individual thing, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like as an owner, yes, I am passionate about food, and I am passionate to make sure that the food is going to be good to every individual that we serve it to.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to be that person making that shit. It's going to be someone else that's very passionate about the food itself. I'm passionate about the idea, but not the act. Like that burger, I'm not making that burger for you. Fuck that. You know what I mean? Like he's making that burger for you, and it's going to be great. And I'm going to make sure that the staff that I put on here and that's making this dream happen is doing what I want them to do. But I'm not doing that. I need to remove myself from that part of it, and that's really hard.
Yeah.
You know.
And
But
you've had that experience doing that also, so you also have the tools and you're
Yeah.
equipped to teach other people to make sure that it's executed well.
True. I would say that yes, but I also feel like I've employed individuals. Like I say all the time, yes, Steven is my husband, but I hired him because he's the best chef I've ever worked for or with and ever tasted from. So that's why he's there. You know what I'm saying? Like he's doing it because he's hella talented in what he does. And I saw that talent, I fostered that talent, but he's really good. You know what I mean?
The last point that I just want to take us into, and I mean we've talked about it, or we kind of touched on it a bit.
Just by the way, he's not very good at pivoting.
We're gonna cut that out. No, but the last thing I wanted to talk about too is like we talked about access to resources before. So you talked earlier, you mentioned like, folks who have this generational wealth that was able to be built on the backs of our unpaid labor and et cetera, they can do a friends and family round because the folks in their ecosystem also have tapped into that capital and they can do that. Or they can go to a bank and get a better interest rate, or they can, whatever it is. But we oftentimes as Black entrepreneurs and as brown entrepreneurs in a place like Oakland don't have those same opportunities to do that. And so, obviously this is a part of ESO Ventures and Build Where You Are. And one of the things that like the founders of ESO were saying was like, look, we recognize this. All of us have tried to start companies ourselves, and like having access to capital and just, having access to funds that's not at some crazy interest rate from a loan shark that's trying to, take everything from you is something that the community needs. So I'm curious, not just as it relates to ESO and like our capital and community fund, but as you have been, scaling up and, going through these pivots and growing your business and having these experiences, accessing capital, what has that been like for you? Have you self-funded everything? Have you gotten money from banks? Have you applied for SBA loans? I know you access the capital and community fund, but like, I'm just curious what that is like. If you could speak about that.
So before ESO, every dollar that I had, I made on my own. In 2020, end of 2022, we were $1 million company in revenue. Thank you. But anyways,
For real though.
I was never given access to capital, nor was even offered any capital ever until I would say you guys. There was another. I did work with another company right before you guys that was going to give me a loan, but they weren't going to give me what I needed.
Gotcha.
So they cut me at the knees. And we were struggling at the time. So I was like, I have to take it. But yeah, I would say the road to capital has been one that I didn't even know I wanted to take because I didn't like the idea of being in debt. But taking the classes and then realizing that it isn't about debt, it's about having someone else pay essentially for your initial venture instead of you paying for all of it. Because that's why I was in the problem I was in, right? I had invested into a program, they didn't pay me on time, and then I'm struggling throughout the year to try to make it up, until we get that next big check. But it wasn't the thing to do. I should have had a loan to help me do that so I could have kept my own capital there. So when I needed it, I could use it. You know what I mean? But because of racism and because of all of this other ways that people talk about how to get money and how to make money.
The financial trauma side of things, like that's one of the things that we talk about in
That's what I'm
the
saying. I've been
program.
broke. I've been homeless. Like I don't.
And folks, as part of, I'm not trying to derail us, I'm keeping us here, but like the financial trauma that our communities have faced is something that isn't often talked about. And one of the reasons why is like, yeah, I'm not about to take out a loan or like, or even somebody's like, oh, I want to invest in your company. I'm like, I'm wary of these things. And even you saying like, growing up in your family and you saw your father take certain financial risks and things, it makes you have a different viewpoint towards money and business and the ways that you go about stuff.
I also think that financial literacy isn't taught the same to us as it is to white kids. I think that, or not white kids, but just affluent children. I grew up in an affluent area, but I was like, I guess I was like Dave Chappelle. I was the brokest kid in the richest neighborhood, right? So it was like I knew about things, I just didn't know how to get them. And in this space, it was the same thing. It was like I know I can hustle this money, and I know where I need to be, but I don't know how to get the money like they did, or how you would traditionally get it. And even when I did try to do the traditional way, I still was pretty much rejected at every bank, everybody, and even the small little community bank that took me before you guys were not trying to give me the money I needed.
Interesting. I mean, it's like two sides, right? It's bad to hear because obviously that's messed up. It's good to hear because it makes it kind of more, it hits more home that the work that ESO is trying to do in our communities is important and is needed. But on the other side of it, it's like it's also not surprising to hear because I talk to so many entrepreneurs all the time who are like, yeah, like I fund this all myself, like myself included for my business. Like people say, oh, like your clothing line. I'm like, no, I did. This is all my money. Like when the pandemic hit, I moved back home with my parents because I was not living in New York and I wasn't sure what was happening. And then that gave me the opportunity to save more money because I wasn't paying New York City rent. And then over those 2 years, I used that money to invest in the business. But from a percentage standpoint, if you look at how Black entrepreneurs and Latino entrepreneurs fund their businesses compared to other folks, we have a much higher percentage of us funding our businesses out of our own capital than other groups. And so for what you were saying, that's why I was saying I'm not surprised because
most of us don't have a rich family member that we can ask for a large loan.
Right.
Or
access to a bank. Yeah. So I appreciate the transparency in all of this. And as we wrap up, I'm not going to say a rapid fire round, but I want to ask you 3 pieces of advice that you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur. 1, just a general piece of advice for any entrepreneur. 2, for somebody who is specifically interested in something in like a food and beverage space. And then 3, for somebody who has not yet started. So a general one industry specific, and 1 for somebody who may be thinking about starting a business but has not started anything yet.
So the 1 is general.
Just general, anything about entrepreneurship.
You will fail, and that's okay. Just get up and keep going. All right. I would say for people in the food industry, chefs are incredibly temperamental. All of them are. None of them are chill. And you need to know how to deal with them, or it won't work. And then for someone who's trying to get into the business.
Yeah, but just hasn't started.
They're
just thinking about starting a business. What would you tell them?
I would say, how do you want to spend your life? Do you want to spend your life in an office with these people that you don't really know or like, or do something that you want to do?
Straightforward, straight up.
Yeah.
Once again, this is Marisa, aka the chef from Cook and Run, ESO Ventures alum, ESO community manager, and just overall powerhouse entrepreneur. I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate you for the gems that you dropped, for the insight that you gave, but also for me personally, just being open, honest, and transparent about this journey. I feel like one of the reasons why we started this podcast is because sometimes you get online and you see people like we were talking about before. Oh, it's easy. All you got to do is buy a house and rent it on Airbnb, or buy that Tesla and put it on Turo, or sell this Forex trading class or whatever. And it's just not rooted in reality. And so I appreciate you so much for coming here and really grounding us in the reality of like, this is what I actually went through. This is the truth. This is how it went. And we keep pushing through it. So thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.